Hi there, my name is Troels. Welcome to Soundpaint. Welcome to our new disco drums. I happen to think that disco is one of the most profound styles of music we've had in the last 5 decades. I'm thinking the birth of hip hop, I'm thinking about house music, I'm thinking about a lot of pop music today. Dua Lipa is pretty much a disco artist, if you will. In Soundpaint, we use the label ultra deep sampled on certain occasions when we really go deep down the lane in terms of sampling, as we're going to do today with new disco drums. But in order to fulfill this tall, high promise of creating the most extensive collection of disco instruments ever done, we have to both look to the past and to the future at the same time. The journey began with our disco violins, which also got the label UDS. This is the most comprehensive collection of disco strings ever done. Like, I just know I can write the most realistic string arrangements ever when it comes to that sort of disco studio sound. But as disco evolved over time, as disco became house music, for example, a lot of new tools arise that are still paying an homage to the past, but also moving the game forward. So for example, when it comes to disco drums, are we looking for vintage disco drums, or are we looking for what in more modern terms is called new disco? When I think of new disco, I think of Daft Punk, I think of Chromeo, I think of Doc Sauce, acts that have really taken the old traditions but brought them forward as well. We're still 4 on the floor, but it's in that modern house kind of way. And even today, we have artists like Dua Lipa, but also Sabrina Carpenter, The Weeknd, Madonna, and many other artists that are constantly pushing this sort of disco tradition forward. And dare I say that our new Disco Drums 1 is a reflection of all the acts that I've mentioned here. We spent months on creating 3 ultra deep sample production kits that was really an homage to all these wonderful artists that have pushed the movement forward. We wanted to create 3 ultra deep sample kits that were in their own right on par with an 808, but particular with new disco in mind. I just say that because we spent an enormous amount of time. It's months of work just to generate 3 drum kits, but as you'll see in this video, they're incredibly playable. We also have another 25 additional kits in this library. There's actually 28 different new disco kits in total. The other 25 are more traditional one sample kits. So if you need specific drum sounds, toms, hi-hats, whatever, and you want a larger arsenal, then you can also go to them. So we're looking at 28 different kits, but with a particular focus on these 3 ultra deep sample kits, which are just a joy to play. They're velocity sampled, they're round robin sampled, and as you may know in Soundpaint, we can morph between velocity layers. So these are fully playable drum kits. They just happen to be more modern. They're partially synthy, partially realistic. Think like what a modern DMX would sound like, pretty much. And with that said, I say we let the keys do the talking. Welcome to New Disco Drums 1. Now, that's one kit, but we can use this one kit in many different styles of music. Let me play a little more sort of synth-wavy disco. Or we can do... It's just so sweet. Because it's ultra deep sample, it's all about velocities and round robins. So when you play the toms, for example, we don't get the same sample. So I can kind of play it like an acoustic kit. If we look up here in the kit, you'll notice that there's 3 parts that creates this Sabrina Superstar kit. We have a clean kit, we have a chamber, and a crushed. Let me try to isolate those, just beginning with the clean one here. It's clean. We can hear a little bit of the analog processing. All these sounds went through extensive analog chains to really, really be dialed in. There's just some sweet noise. But we also took the same samples and gave them a treatment in chambers. This is an old school production method where you would shoot sounds into sound chambers, isolated rooms with microphones and amplifiers, and then get more of a sort of roomy kind of sound to it. And we try to isolate this one here. It's not the prettiest thing on its own, but it does something in the mix. But if we take this on top of the clean kit here, it's like having a really nice old school plate reverb, except that it's a chamber. But if we look at the volume button here, it's a little too loud for what we want here. So I'm going to dial it down a bit. We just want to have a little bit in the background. So you can dial in how vintage you want the sound here just by using the volume knob on the chamber. On top of this, we also have a third crushed part for each of the ultra deep sample kits here. This is going to sound more distorted in its own right. And combined with the clean, it gives us a more sort of punchy sound. The sound is a little more crushed on part 3. And all three combined, it becomes a little more full and rich sounding. So it's kind of interesting for me to play with what normally is sort of a single shot kit, which we have in the library as well. But using this ultra deep sample stuff here, having access to all the different production parts here, just makes it so easy to get something right out of the box. I don't need to do any further treatment. It's some nice guitars, right? This is coming from our upcoming disco guitars, which is just an amazing library, so full of life. And we've just learned some new techniques and technologies that we are completely going to pursue because we can actually do guitars that sound real now. I've never really heard rhythmic guitars ever done on the computer very well. It always sounds so stiff and kind of like, you know, computer-like when we listen to it. This sounds alive. You can also hear that in the second example here. There's a few more instruments that prettifies this little mini demo. One of them coming here from our Juno 60 UDS arpeggiator. It just has such a warmth and bite to it. You'll notice up here that the volume is going back and forth. I create a little bit of a side chaining effect by just right-clicking on volume and assigning an LFO to it here. If we go inside of the matrix here, you can see here the volume is being modulated. And I'm doing that in the middle of the bias here. That's real analog for you. And of course, I had to do Sabrina Carpenter justice as well. And if you're wondering where all those like strings are coming from doing the infamous disco fall, that is coming from our disco strings in Soundpaint, which is an ultra deep sample library for strings here. It's incredibly flexible. We have, for example, 3 different types of disco falls at different lengths here. I'm just using one of them. It's just such a cute sound. It's used so many times across history in the last 40 years. And I think we got to bring back the disco falls here. I just love them. I'm going to use them so much. Now, to this point, we've only been listening to one kit out of 28 different kits in this library here. Here's our second UDS kit called Cassie. When Colin and I created this library, we were talking a lot about, like, we wanted that DMX feel from the DMX, really try to create kits that had the same kind of vibe. I mean, this one, like, straight up sap. Now, you might notice that when I'm playing this one here, that I'm using more than just the regular snare, but also here in the E. This is such a classic, like, old school 80s. But when you combine them, also the bass drum, you hear how there's a little bit of 808 on it. It's not totally flat, and because it's velocity based, we can go like... I just love this because it takes so long sometimes to sit and produce these kits, and in our DAW, it'll be a vast section of plugins and trying to really dial in the sound here. Just having them out of the gate is such a pleasure. And if you look at the second kit here, it follows the same convention. We got clean, chamber, and crushed here as well. Here's another example using the same kit. So simple. I mean, it helps when you have a really nice sounding saxophone as well. Let me just jam with it a little bit here. I absolutely love the P bass here. We got a couple of questions on it in our disco strings video because I use it all the time. This is coming from our Ultra Deep sample Jupiter 8 here. It's just the perfect bass sound. It's almost better than acoustic bass because it's so clean, but it's also kind of vibey and old school. And to me at least, this is why I keep coming back to using Ultra Deep Sample synthesizers. I get that natural variance that we won't find in cooler, colder, though brilliant digital clones. I just prefer knowing that whatever I'm playing here is the real deal. Here's the third Ultra Deep Sample kit in the library as well, also known as Sylvia. And for this one here, I'm actually using a real P bass coming from our P bass library as well. Here's a vastly different example using Sylvia as well. Something in the air. Let's listen isolated to the drum kit here. It's really just a great groove on its own. You sense that sort of DMX smack on the snare and the clap? In these different kind of production elements, they may not sound so much in their own right here, but they're designed to be put together in these kits here. We took all the different elements we could hear from the greatest kits of all time, particularly with neo disco, and sort of broke them into individual pieces here. Is this a rim shot, a snare? What is this? What is this? You know, it's kind of clappy, but you put that together with the snare on its own, snare with clap. Just different. I love this vintage talk box here as well. This is also ultra deep sampled, so even when I play the same note, it'll generate a different kind of variation of the vocal here. Just so sweet to play. Next. And while this track here may not totally qualify as a disco track, it will always be that way in my mind. I just love this track. And we talked about being sloppy on the grid. These claps, for example, that are in here, I just played them once and that was the way it is. Because if you listen to the original track, it's kind of loose as well. All the components were live back in the day. So when we work on the grid here, let's try to be loose. Let's loosen up on the grid here. It just makes the music better, more alive, particularly for these kind of styles of music. And that second clap, I'm totally like sloppy. But I can feel a human in there. This is where the AI kind of breaks down. It just doesn't do these kind of things. It's not alive this way. So it's kind of like language.
If I was just speaking on a grid right now and being rhythmic, it would be kind of boring listening to me and kind of weird as well.
I feel it's the kind of same thing going on inside of the DAW. So really, really important just to be loose. Now, we've only been listening to the first 3 kits in the library. As I mentioned, there's 28 of them. So the first segment here was really to cover the ultra deep sampled kits here, but let me just show you the 25 other kits we have as well. These are in 5 different kits per patch. So when you load one part, you have 5 octaves, which each have a unique kit per octave on them here. So there's a lot to play. In this part here, I'm not going to talk so much, just going to play and have fun. So for example, on every key of C, different kind of kick drums, or on C sharp, or on deep sharp and F sharp, different kind of hi-hats. So we have a wealth of different kind of kits. We can combine them different ways. So see these additional 25 kits as sort of color additions to the ultra deep sample kits here. If you need that particular hi-hat, that snare, maybe some extra claps, maybe some toms, they're all here. There's 25 different kits, so there's an enormous amount of stuff to show here. Let me just quickly try to play you through all 5 octaves. Different kind of cymbals. Open hi-hats. And I can try with different kind of bass drums too. So I'm looking for colors here. I like this one here. A little bit like 707-ish. So for example, with the cymbal here, it's kind of docking. That leaves more room for the bass drum. Whereas with a normal cymbal, it's very crashy in the beginning here. But when it comes to new disco, sort of more modern production, we like to just take care of that so you don't have to think about it. It's already docking, it's already doing its side chaining kind of thing. Let me load another 5 kits. We have 25. That was just the first 5. Kit 6 to 10 here has a little more of a sort of analog, bit crushy, mild distortion kind of effect on it. It's a little bit dirty. We want to have those colors so we can combine them with other kits as well. Let me take another one here from 11 to 15, 5 brand new kits. If you notice here on the keyboard, we have 3 different styles of hi-hat, from very thin, super tight, to normal, and open. And then we got the cymbal here. That goes for all the kits. So we know on D sharp, we get these very tiny, clicky kind of hi-hats, a little more open here, a little more open again. And then all the cymbals here as well. It's neat to have it because you can actually morph different kits. You'll know that whenever you use any of these kits, that the layout is exactly the same no matter what bank they're coming from. So you can also quickly try out grooves. Let's say that I just make a quick groove here in the DAW, and then I'll try to use different kind of parts and superimpose them on what I'm doing here. So for example, with one kit, or another one here, so I can try the different parts here and just quickly try out different colors. And I can move it across the different octaves too. And let's say, okay, I like everything here. I just want to change like the hi-hat to another octave here. I'll just jump octaves right now. Kind of like this one down here. This is so classic 909, this one. Okay, let me just take this rhythm here and spice it up with a few synthesizers too. I mean, it's so simple. Now, if we look here at the parts browser, we'll notice in the directory here that we have the 25 different kits here. That's a lot to show in its own right here. And then the 3 different UDS kits here, which each comes in 3 different parts here. It just goes to show how deep this library is. And note that it's only called New Disco Drums 1. That's because we have more volumes coming out with even more drum kits. So this is very extensive. We're going to go very, very deep in this. And most importantly, try to create like timeless kind of kits. For me, particularly with the UDS kits here, I just know they're going to live in my template for a long ass time because they just do exactly what we need them to do. It's months on our behalf doing all the research and building these kits here. It's not easily done. One has to really know from an engineering point of view what goes into creating specific, deep, professional drum programs here as well. Just like we can talk about violins or saxophones or other instruments, how deep those rabbit hole goes. Synthesizers in my case here, which I love so much. But when it comes to drum programming, creating drum sounds, it's equally deep. It's a true mastery in its own right here. These kits here just works.